All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for a seriously mind-bending dialectical journey, one that is going to completely dismantle our conventional understanding of reality. We're diving into the work of the 2nd century philosopher Nagarjuna. He used this incredibly rigorous logical engine to prove that the solid, independent world we think we live in is actually a profound cognitive mirage. Look, if you've ever felt kind of trapped by your circumstances or weighed down by the rigid facts of life, this logic is literally designed to set you completely free.
Okay, let's just quickly glance at our roadmap. We'll be walking through an 11-step logical process, moving through 1. The 5 spheres of reality, 2. The tetralemma logic trapdoor, 3. Deconstructing space and time, 4. Union of the two truths, 5. The relational illusory web, and finally 6. The liberating middle way. Let's just dive right in.
Section 1. The 5 spheres of reality, the conventional quintet we intuitively believe. So, the fundamental problem Nagarjuna hits on is that human suffering basically stems from grasping at solid boxes. We naturally slice up the seamless, beautiful flow of existence into separate little categories just to make sense of the world. But then, and here's the catch, we mistakenly believe those categories are absolutely real.
Just think about our conventional reality. We intuitively break it down into this quintet, these 5 spheres: consciousness, phenomena, causality, space, and time. On a conventional level, we assume these are completely different, separate entities that somehow retain their own strict individuality. We assume you have an independent subject, like you, looking at an independent object out there in the world, and you're interacting through a rigid chain of causality, all playing out on the fixed objective background stage of space, just ticking along a linear flow of time. We truly believe they have an inherent absolute existence. But do they actually?
Which brings us to Section 2, the tetralemma logic trapdoor, basically a 4-fold negation weapon. This is Nagarjuna's brilliant logical tool, and it's designed to test literally any grouping of those 5 spheres and trigger their complete deconstruction.
So, let's say we group any of those 5 spheres together, maybe consciousness versus phenomena or space versus time. The tetralemma forces us to prove exactly how they relate by running them through 4 inescapable corners. First, are they identical? Well, if they're the exact same thing, they literally can't interact. Okay, are they completely separate? If they're totally independent and sealed off from one another, there's no bridge for them to ever touch or cause anything. Right, so are they both? That's just a blatant logical contradiction. Are they neither? That's pure chaos and nihilism. Every single alternative we analyze here leads to total contradiction and absurdity. We can run this tetralemma on any grouping of those 5 opposites, and the result is always exactly the same. Their absolute inherent existence completely collapses.
Moving on to Section 3, deconstructing space and time, and why the background of reality is empty. Now this is where things get really wild. Even if objects aren't solid, surely the stage of the universe, space and time, is real, right? Well, Nagarjuna applies the trapdoor to show why even this background is an illusion.
Let's try to actually isolate time for a second. Try to locate an independent, absolute action of causality or motion. Where is it happening? It's not in the past, that's already gone and the energy spent. It's not in the future, that hasn't even begun yet. So it absolutely must be in the present, right? But wait, if you isolate a pure, absolute present, totally severing it from the past and future, you are left with a frozen moment of absolute zero duration. And within 0 seconds, there is no physical room for spatial movement or cause and effect to even occur. Time literally cannot contain absolute movement. So ultimately, space and time completely fail this tetralemma test because they are entirely codefined by the objects moving within them. They aren't an absolute container or some objective theater stage. Without a moving thing or an action to measure, the very concepts of space and time instantly collapse into pure absurdity. They're really just conceptual buckets, entirely dependent on phenomena. Okay, Section 4, Union of the Two Truths, Rebuilding from the Vertigo of Emptiness. Now, if you're tracking with this logic, you might be feeling a little intellectual vertigo right about now, as the inherent existence of literally everything shatters around us.
And this naturally brings up a pretty terrifying question. If everything is empty of inherent essence, does nothing exist? Have we just deleted the universe? Are we free-falling into a dark, meaningless void? Let's directly address the sphere of nihilism because what actually remains when the scaffolding falls is magnificent.
First off, we absolutely have to embrace emptiness, which is known as the second truth. Now, emptiness does not mean nothingness, not at all. It is the profound lack of absolute independent essence or swabhava in any phenomenon. We ultimately have to conclude that all five opposites in spheres are empty of inherent existence simply because they cannot stand absolutely alone.
But then we have the first truth, dependent origination. This is the reality that these spheres, consciousness, phenomena, causality, space, and time, are entirely inseparable. They're interdependent, co-defined, and co-evolving. They are mere designations, conventional tools that are totally co-imputed by the mind. So yes, they exist, but they exist strictly as a relational flux.
And put together, these concepts form the union of the two truths. Emptiness is literally the exact mechanism that makes dependent origination possible. Think about it. If a seed had a rigid absolute seed essence, it could never change into a sprout. It would just be frozen forever. It's exactly because things lack a rigid essence that they are completely free to flow, change, and interact conventionally. These two truths are in perfect union.
Let's look at Section 5, the relational illusory web, perceiving the mirage of reality. Now that we understand how the two truths are united, what is the true nature of our five spheres? What does this actually mean for the world we look at every single day?
The source material uses this gorgeous analogy, describing our reality as being like an echo in a canyon. It's vividly present and highly functional, yet it's there, yet not there, entirely devoid of a solid core. Because the five spheres only exist conventionally and dependently, they are totally illusory. It's like a reflection in a mirror. You can clearly see it and it functions perfectly, but if you try to reach out and grab its solid core, your hand just hits flat glass.
If we apply the generalized tetralemma to all of this, it proves that reality is, at its core, indescribable. You just can't say the universe is entirely this or non-this, both or neither. It completely transcends all the rigid little conceptual boxes our minds try to build. Reality is an entirely fluid, limitless, and centerless web.
Which brings us to the ultimate payoff in Section 6, the liberating middle way, acting without acting. How do we take this dense 11-step logical deconstruction and actually translate it into a practical mindset for our everyday lives?
When you really internalize that the world lacks inherent desirability or repulsiveness, because again, absolutely nothing is absolute, you can finally cease grasping at rigid identities. We can stop fearing outcomes as if they're these permanent radioactive stains. We just embrace the flux. We utilize conventional concepts to navigate our day, sure, but we aren't psychologically trapped by them anymore. This is the absolute essence of the middle way.
The whole mindset boils down to acting without acting. Just think about navigating a major career failure. Conventionally, yeah, a mistake was made, you learn from it, you plan your next move. But ultimately, you completely refuse to treat that failure as an absolute permanent stain on yourself, because neither the failure nor the self possess any independent essence. You are participating fully in the conventional world, but you are completely liberated from the suffering of absolute attachment.
And honestly, what this leaves us with is a profound, luminous peace. The sources tell us that in this empty, fluid state, we can perceive everything as primordially equal, pure, and one in the non-dual sense. Because there are literally no absolute inherent flaws in the cycles of reality, everything functions seamlessly precisely because it is empty. We finally stop demanding the universe be an independent, solid machine, and instead we just join the dance.
So to wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with a somewhat provocative thought. When you make a choice today, are you the absolute inherent cause of your actions? Or are you simply the beautiful empty space where an infinite web of conditions is briefly coming together? Really think about that the next time you fiercely try to take the credit or brutally take the blame for something. The boundaries of reality are fluid. Keep exploring.